Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are the first time who joining the ITS seminar, my name is Siwei Hu, a third-year PhD student at UCI ITS. Today, we are so happy we could have Professor Lóránt to give us a talk on innovation roadmaps for freight transportation and their implication for research. Professor Lóránt Tavasszy is a professor of freight transport and logistics systems at Delft University of Technology, TU Delft School of Engineering and Geoscience, which he joined in 2009. His research is focused in the area of freight transport modeling at urban, national, and global level. He currently chairs the Scientific Committee of the World Conference of Transport Research Society. Please join us in a warm applause and welcome Professor Lóránt Tavasszy.
Thank you. So concerning the World Conference for Transport Research, let me advertise. We have a webinar week at the last week of July, which is completely free. And it contains like 30 different webinars on all topics of transport science. And we already have, I think, around 1,000 people registered for the webinar. So if you have any area of specialization, you feel like joining in for a webinar of a couple of hours, feel free to register. I will put the URL in the chat later on. And next year, so in July 23, we'll have the conference in Montreal. So that's also for everyone from North America and South America. It could be interesting because it's relatively close by. Last conference was in Mumbai, which was a bit further away, but this one will be Montreal. So, sorry, I couldn't help this. Since you mentioned the WCTR, I thought I'd just throw this in the beginning, get it done. Siwa, can I share my screen?
Yes, I think you could. I say you're the co-host.
Thank you. So, is the title screen visible?
Okay. Yeah, pretty great.
Okay, so this talk is and great to be here, everyone. Really appreciate it that you are there this early, and so see some familiar names. Great honor to be here and to talk to you. When I was asked to do this, I thought I would tell you a little bit about our experiences in Europe and about innovation roadmaps. So I work at the Delft University. We have a lab in freight and logistics, which works across different faculties. And so civil engineering, technology, policy management, industrial engineering, and so on, aerospace. And we think a lot about innovation, technological innovation. But there's a huge process going on outside the university where innovations are being practiced, are being developed. This presentation is to explain how this works in Europe and how we try to link our research to it. I've been involved personally in these kind of movements within Europe. You know, the European Commission spends a lot of money on research and on development. It's really about hundreds of millions of euros. And I'm part of the group that defines this research. And we work a lot with industry where we ask them what are their needs. We create visions together, and then we try to formulate our research in that direction. And so this story is to explain to you how this works in Europe and what are the ideas also behind it. So it's not just the process, but also we have a good cooperation also with the US in how we shape these ideas. And at the end of my talk, it should be clear to you how this connection is and what are the main topics, and also what kind of research topics can be derived from there. And it's something completely different than working from a research gap that you find from the literature. It's something which is demand driven. So this is the outline of the story. And I have 3 main topics that I want to discuss. This will take about 45 minutes to an hour, and so plus or minus 15 minutes each. And the first one is about the innovation as an object. So what kind of innovations are we thinking of when we say that? So this is actually asking about what the direction is of the system itself. So the autonomous evolution of the logistics system. Where do we think it is going on the long term? And what is the role of very specific technologies, niches, orgware, hardware, software in this long-term development? Once we have got this clear, we have a target. So we can think about how to reach that target and how to support this long-term evolution, or how to try to change this. And this will create what we call innovation roadmaps. It tells us how to get there from where we are now. We have such a roadmap, a dominant roadmap, which is continuously updated, of course, and so on and so on. This is for freight and logistics, and I would like to share the details of this with you. And then next, of course, it is the question, how do we tune our research to have an impact on this roadmap? So not thinking from a supply-driven stance, so let's look at the literature, let's see what has not been studied yet, let's study that, but how do we line up our research towards a desired impact according to this roadmap? And this answers the question, what new research gaps exist? Of course, some of these things will be trivial from a scientific perspective, some of these won't, and then it's up to us to choose things that aren't. So this is the ABC of today. I cannot see you people, so if anyone has questions in between, don't hesitate to interrupt me. I cannot see when you raise your hand, so don't be afraid to just unmute and drop in a question in between, and we'll have a longer discussion over the entire story afterwards. But if anything is not clear, please go ahead. Sorry?
Yeah, and if any of you have questions, you could type them in the chat or raise hand. I could read it out for Professor Tavasszy.
Perfect, thank you, thank you. So this is a way to keep everyone on board. You know, if you feel something is not entirely clear, just intervenes, no problem at all. We have our time. So this is the outline that I sketched already in words, the distance between academia and logistics practice. So if we look at academia, there are some kind of seminal papers. I wouldn't say this about myself, but there's certainly a seminal paper by Benoit Montreuil, who's now at Georgia Tech, who used to be at Cyril, and wrote about the physical internet, which is kind of theoretical ideas about the system. And on the other hand, there's practice. You know, we can ask supply chain managers, supply chain practitioners, logistics practitioners, where they think this is going. And they will typically tell you about the latest trends. So what you can find in the blogs and so on, and what kind of directions the supply chain is taking. You know, from the past year, of course, we know about the huge disruptions. We have seen many sudden changes, with e-commerce during COVID and so on. So things that attract our attention. And from practice, you will hear and see about this. And there's a big gap between the two. So whatever our ideas are about theoretically where the system could evolve or something, where what we could predict and what is practice is saying, these are not necessarily consistent. And so where we have our research resources and we invent new things, we create new systems on paper, and where the needs are, there's what we call between those the valley of death. So it takes a while before ideas and science trickle through into practice, before they are at a stage that they can be actually applied from pure research ideas towards something applicable. And it takes even longer before it's commercialized, before the company picks it up or a government says you should do this and that, or starts to regulate or starts to, in a different way, influence the system. This takes another process where somebody from the user side really has to take a step. And this is the valley of death, or the distance that I'm addressing. So I'm not purely talking about the research side, not purely about practice, but about what connects the two, the bridge. So this is to position the story more clearly for you. Now, what we have in between is what I call a public-private or private-public innovation arena. So this is like in the old Rome, the gladiators used to fight with the tigers. This is where the public and the private people from industry, from government, also civil society, like the NGOs, where they come together and discuss where they should go and how these things could be connected and should be connected. And what could and should is a big difference, but this is where sometimes they agree, and this lands in roadmaps. These are the roadmaps I will be discussing, and they're all from one group. This is the arena that we've organized. We had a meeting in Brussels some time ago, Tuesday, where we were with 100 people discussing this roadmap. People from industry, from various big brands, and also people from government and people from research. And we were discussing exactly these roadmaps, where we were and where we should be going with new research. So these are terms sometimes a bit mystical, cryptical, like the physical internet and synchromodality, and zero emission logistics, things that we as scientists would say, well, what is it really? What is it exactly? Does it really exist? But sometimes there's a good definition for it, and it's a workable definition for practice and for research also. And this is what the physical sublimation is, or the physical result is of such a discussion in an arena where we put things on paper, so we both all look at the same thing together. So this is the what in between, with what links, what bridges the valley of death to an extent. We also have discussions of what is next needed to bridge the valley of death completely from a commercial viewpoint and so on. But these are the ideas as they are shaping. I see a chat. Okay, sorry, this was something else. So what is this logistics practice of the future? Let me start by sketching the demand side background. Yeah, so I'm not talking about optimizing a system for something, but it's about how consumer logistics services and how the services behind it are evolving. And this is like a dartboard, if you wish, in 2 dimensions, where products and services are ordered according to their lead times and to the degree of customization. And what we've seen in the past is that things were pretty standard and had a long lead time, the T Ford, and now more and more stuff and services are being customized and have a very short lead time. And what we see is that supply chain structure, so these are examples of products in these 4 categories that you will recognize. This is a 3D printer with a bunny inside, 3D printed bunny. This is a car that you can customize yourself, but it will not start production before you have done so. And so you'll recognize these things. These are car parts, vegetables, so on. So this slowly, the world is evolving from standardized towards more and more customized and short lead time. We've seen this in the past years with e-commerce. And the trick is that all these product categories require or have their own distribution structure across the world. So there are consequences as to how this will physically be organized, from products being built to stock and stored in big distribution centers towards rapid fulfillment and flexible order production very near to the customer. So this is a kind of a law of nature, if you wish, which is determining where logistics is going in terms of demand. Now, what we have now is that all these options, all these chains are available at the same time, even for the same product. So if I want toothbrush, I can order it from China through AliExpress, and it will take maybe 8 weeks or 3 months to get here. It'll be very cheap, maybe less than $1, and even including shipping. But it will take a long time, and it will be brought to my home. But I can also walk around the corner to the next drugstore and buy one, which will be a little bit more expensive. I can have it delivered also from there. I can work through a locker to pick it up. They can even bring it to my workplace if I want. So this kind of omni-channel revolution, as we call it, so all these channels at the same time, they're becoming available. This is the ultimate pleasing and the ultimate spoiling of the customer. Of course, this is very costly, and we're all saying that this will not take long before companies realize that they cannot keep up this service, but they do. It's an all-you-can-eat banquet. So what's going on here, and how can companies keep this up? And this is now I'm moving slowly towards the story of innovation, towards the why of these innovations, and what the message is here of the overarching objective. But it starts with this story that pleasing the customer is becoming more and more expensive. Yeah, we have this servitization trend, we have an individualized society, we have customized offerings, and this leads to massively increasing costs for production, delivery. It leads also to increased externalities like CO2 emissions and so on. So how to pay for this? And what we see now is that companies like Amazon, they're still making losses on this, but they are able to co-fund this or to cross-subsidize this with other revenues. Some companies try to approach this omni-channel with revenue management, so they will subsidize the more costly channels with the channels where they earn more money, or they will simply cut costs. So, but still now in many of these e-delivery cases and e-commerce settings, one of our retail CFOs said this is an island, these are islands of loss in seas of profit. So there's not so much going on, but still, after a while, the shareholders will require some profits. So what is next, and what is when the kind of the opportunities to solve this within a company's boundaries internally, when they are depleted, so when company is cross-subsidized enough, they cannot balance it internally anymore, and the pressure to reduce the cost will remain because the client will never be satisfied, and it will be an ongoing thing to servitize and to individualize in many different directions. So the search for this funding of this development will go on externally. Yeah, companies will agree to compete in the front office, and they will start to cooperate in the back office. Now, this cooperation is a broad term. It could be collaboration. It could also be mergers and acquisitions, but there will be some kind of bundling, some kind of consolidation of the logistics services in the background. We call this the cross-chain coordination. And this can be in procurement and sourcing and distribution delivery. So whenever it's about transportation, this is relatively easy to organize. And we see this already today. Yeah, and very concrete things like companies moving together to organize their freight for rail. We see this in what, for example, Jose Olguenveras has done for a decade now, is receiver-led consolidation. Collaboration, horizontal collaboration between carriers, agreeing to share their free capacity. Electronic freight markets, mergers and acquisitions, as I said, of logistic service providers, co-procurement, where companies decide to procure together. So, and this is the heart of what is known as the physical internet vision, where this will create open networks where not just 2 or 3 companies decide to work together, but where they systematically create something which is open for everyone, and where you just enter and you benefit from the economies of scale immediately. So part of that problem of how to pay for this growth, how to pay for improved services, has been solved this way. This is a long-term development, right? So because all these things that you see here in blue, these call-outs, they're not easy to operate. We already see them, but it will take a decade or 2 before they stabilize. So this is the background, the why of this physical internet. Now, if we want to define the physical internet, what is it? Then this is the first picture I'd like to show you. These are the faces of Benoit Montreuil from Georgia Tech and Eric Ballot, who is his French colleague from Paris, who have really brought this physical internet topic to the surface academically. And we have thousands of papers now which work on this physical internet, which discuss it and link it to the previous developments in supply chain research. It's an internet term, so we can associate it with other internets. It's an analogy to the digital internet. It's not the same as the Internet of Things. Internet of Things is when objects start to talk to each other. And the energy internet is Jeremy Rifkin's big vision about the third industrial revolution, is where energy is also in grids, shared more easily in 2 ways. So we become also producers and prosumers of energy. But the physical internet is mostly recognizable by analogy of the digital internet. So as easily as I join on the internet and we can talk to each other, I have no sense of what's going on beneath us with all the cables and all the services. We just talk to each other. I push a button and it's there. I don't have to sign any contract and so on, so on. I mean, I did long ago somewhere on the website, but I wouldn't really know for this session what it is. So what if freight would work this way? Yeah, an open system. Now, let's try to define this a little bit more precisely. Yeah, it's a continuous dynamic system level optimization. So it's not user optimization, as we know that every user chooses his own path, a user equilibrium with congestion, but it's a system level optimization. So someone, or a group is looking together at how the network is used by all the users together, and they try to optimize in a way that everybody gets a share and that there's compensation so that the total will benefit, and the maximum level of economies of scale are they can materialize. And there's a huge new business value here. There have been like projections from the World Economic Forum here that it's about trillions of US dollars and so on. So, and basically it's three components. It's improved visibility. So we know where stuff is all the time, and we can decide every second to postpone shipments, to split them, to let them join. You know, we're far away from this today because even the big service providers, the big five, they don't know where their freight is all the time. You know, they may have a container with a container number and know what's inside a container, but it's not that they deal with this in a flexible way. What if this would happen, and even across all these companies? That's the next stage of visibility. There will have to be some kind of movement on standardization. We have the containers, we have the pallet sizes, we have totes, we have boxes, and so on and so on. But these are not really well harmonized, and not to an extent that across industries, across companies, we can easily share freight. So this is where they came up with the PI container, where PI is not just the Greek pi, but it's PI for physical internet. This is where the PI container fits into the say a maritime container, and we know all what's inside. And the third one is that assets are shared through collaboration. So a network is open, which means that I can use anyone's box, and I can put in a box, and my box will be the freight in the box may be traded with someone else, and I will get something else in return, and so on. This is a bit more difficult to imagine, but once everything is fully standardized, it's also easy to share. We recycle bottles and cans, so why wouldn't we recycle also real freight? Tokenize it, as it were. So this is a more precise definition of what's going on underneath in this physical internet, and what would allow this massive consolidation to take place.
Excuse me, Professor Tavasszy.
Yes.
I thought there's a question from the chat from Professor J.
Yes.
He says, are there parallels to airline passenger yield management? Yes.
So absolutely, great remark. So we will come later at a definition of what we call synchromodal transport, where in freight we will see different things like code sharing, revenue management happening, which is not yet happening. So between companies, we have in the maritime alliances, of course, this already, but not in overland transport. So there are nice parallels here with airlines, absolutely. And these are the systems that need to be installed with standards and with proper governance and so on, which would take a long time to work across modes. I'll come back to this later on. So these are a couple of nice graphics of Benoit that I wanted to show you. So the left one says that having an open network is not the same as a union of underlying networks. So you see a supply network one here at the left with the black triangle up, and the yellow triangle signal show another company's network with two distribution centers. We can join these together, but we'll have a lot of costs, you know, running all these distribution centers. And eventually, if we would run them together, then some might be obsolete and some would have to grow, and an entirely new network would evolve. If we would take some time and redesign it, it might look like this, yeah? Which is open and which is exploited by 1 and 2 together, but it doesn't look like their union. So rethinking all these networks physically and in terms of services is also a big step. The right picture shows the different layers of activity here. So this is not just about transportation and about networks, it's also about what they call the encapsulation layer, where shipments are in containers and containers are inside other containers, and where there's also a logistic web layer, as they say, with the purchase orders. So we could even share freight. I mean, if my toothbrush is on the way from China and I can wait 1 more month, then the toothbrush could also go to someone else, and I would get another one, which would arrive a month later with some kind of reduction in the price. So all these things are impossible now, but we could think this through at different levels, of course. So a very simple example, practical. Again, I'm using, and I checked this with Benoit. He's okay if I use his graphics, but they're so nice. So this shows what would happen if we would share distribution centers in the US. So, his statement is that most companies only use 1 or 2 DCs, and most DCs are only used by 1 or 2 companies. So 535,000 DCs in the USA, only 500,000. What if every company could use each of these DCs? Yeah, and they would be open. And what kind of new network would evolve from this? Yeah, so this will create a new wave of rationalization in logistic services and in real estate. So some distribution centers would cease to exist, and others would like blow up. Yeah, so this is, I think, one of the consequences of the physical internet, which is already going on. I mean, we can observe it, with as power in these networks is consolidated, we can see these kind of movements. And it's just thinking ahead 20, 30, 40 more years. So what is the physical internet 1.0? This is a great picture that shows, I think, what it leads to is the platform economy. So you will see in the background the website of FedEx with the different service propositions underneath. And for every service proposition, there are 1 or 2 platforms that already do this, electronically, quickly, linked easily. So what these big service providers are doing, they're trying to buy these, whatever develops well, they try to join it and encapsulate it and work with that. So this platform economy is we no longer have this divide with the big service providers and the fast new ones. I mean, they're slowly becoming integrated, and the number of platforms is it's growing immensely quickly and being reorganized all the time. It's an exciting world where these platforms together provide the kind of hyper connectivity that we have seen in these open networks. And this is only version 1.0. So how would it go from here? Now, so a new technology, if we talk about innovations in freight transport, many of you will think of technologies like the Hyperloop, or we had a student defending his master thesis on this kind of electrical road system where trucks have these catenary lines, these overhead lines, and they can do dynamic charging on the highway. They're running tests with this in Germany and in Sweden and in UK. And it's a nice alternative. You only need a small battery, to get you to the highway and back. And but on the highway you can charge, so you can drive fully from. So these kind of technologies, rockets, drones, platooning, I mean, they will all find their niche inside this physical internet system. But how? Yeah, so we cannot view these systems in isolation. We have to try to position it within this new landscape of supply chain networks and how these cooperate. And there's a lot of ICT innovation going on as well. So it's not just transport technology. Of course, most of this is driven by digitalization and new opportunities. It's about digital bills of lading that allow transfer of loads from one mode to another more easily. It's about blockchain, trying to decentralize and then make federated, distributed systems of proofs of ownership and so on. And this will also be needed to make this consolidation happen and to open up networks. But the message here is that you cannot view these things in isolation anymore. So we have to develop a comprehensive view on the whole system where the organization of the system and its technology are completely in line. And for that, we need a kind of a grand vision. Even if it's a bit esoteric or too grand, it has to try to capture all these technologies and give it a place to sit in. So now, another dimension here, besides technologies, institutions, and governance, I already alluded to it a little bit, what we see now is that companies, they don't really have, well, we don't really have the physical internet. You could say that companies don't even have a physical intranet. I mean, the big service providers like DHL, DB Schenker, or FedEx, they have their own silos, right? Air transport services, road transport services, sea maybe, or port services, and they're not really well connected. The fact is they have trouble getting the services together to form a decent proposition door to door across different modes for their clients. And they will often hire someone outside for road services because they cannot easily get to their own. So this has to develop first, these intranets. And once they are developed, then they can offer services, vertically well integrated services. A company who's very busy with this is Maersk, who's originally a maritime company, maritime shipping company, and they're trying with terminals and road services, trying to provide vertically integrated services to their clients. Then if more companies do this, then the next step is for them to integrate. So if we have DB Schenker and DHL, for example, and they both achieve this, then we can speak about the physical internet if they all come together. And that's a big if, of course, but it's already happening, as I can show you here. So this is a picture of the maritime alliances we have in global trade, global waterborne trade. Horizontally, you see a time scale running from 2015 to 2020. And the colors are the alliances in which individual companies, you see on the left how many they were in 2015, how they cooperate. And basically, they divided a large part of the market amongst themselves. This is one of the reasons why the rates in maritime transport have gone to 5 times or 10 times what we used to pay before COVID. So because of capacity shortages and because of their power, they could raise prices. And this is already also a sign of the physical internet working, where they decided we cannot do without cooperating. So, of course, they don't call it the physical internet, but it's a sign, a signal that this physical internet story is not completely realistic, that it has some elements inside which were already reality. And there are also, in terms of institutional governance, there's also a drive to take control of these undesired externalities. So because a system which tries to chase efficiency and high performance logistics services, it's not geared towards sustainability. I mean, it might have a sustainability knock-on effect because if you work more efficiently, you emit less carbon. But still, it's a different story than trying to reach a target of like 85% carbon reduction. I mean, there's no way we're going to shop our way out of that. We'll have to reduce carbon by increasing efficiency and some more. So we cannot say that this physical internet is completely sustainable or will help us or will help us to fulfill our sustainability goals immediately. Whether it's climate or whether it's social, that there will be some more will be needed. So there's also a big institutional and a governance question. How can we steer the system, this big system which evolves by itself through the market? How can we steer it towards the results that we want? And the example on the left is a nice one. China is really strong in here, where they, we always think it's difficult for us to accept. It's not a pure democracy as we know it here, but once they have a problem in terms of, like in this case, the social circumstances in which the carriers have to live and work, they just regulate the sector. They say, if you don't treat your workers well, we'll shut you down. I cannot see something like this happening in the US or in Europe. So, but this is what will be needed to a certain extent to manage the physical internet towards sustainability. So this is an important dimension of the whole system, and this closes the first part about these logistics innovations. And the main term to remember here is this physical internet. I want to pause here for just a minute to see whether there are any questions about this part. I can see some things in the chat. About maritime companies buying lots of non-maritime freight companies. Do you think it is opportunistic because they get so much revenue? How is it part of long-term? Yeah, thanks, Leticia. I think it's part of a long-term strategy because I think this long-term strategy is to become vertically more integrated. So I hope this is close to what you meant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But was it part of a strategy before
Yeah,
No.
it was. Yes.
Yeah.
So Maersk has already been doing this for 8 years. Yeah. And they're very slow. Costco is also doing it. That's why they bought the sport in Greece. Yeah. So they understand that they cannot do without this vertical integration.
Okay.
Yeah. But I definitely it will increase their power. Yeah. So there's this is dangerous. Yeah. So how far do we want this to go? And European Commission doesn't know what to do about this. So it's interesting.
Thanks.
Yeah. So okay. Any other questions on physical internet? There are a lot of papers around here about this topic, and so just you can look it up and don't try to see this as a very well-defined system. It's a vision. It's a vision, a grand vision, and a compelling vision at the same time, which makes it interesting. Okay, so
a quick question.
Yes, please.
Can I ask a clarify question?
Yes.
In your previous slide, it says the 2M and it says THE, it says ocean. Can you clarify what that means?
Yes. These are the names of alliances. So these are, I think, I forgot what it stands for. But these are alliances. Yeah. So you see the 2M is Maersk, and there was here Mediterranean MSC, and these are the two biggest, and they work together basically like airlines would do, code sharing and so on and so on. So, but effectively, one could say that these are 3 companies. Yeah. So we've gone from 15 companies to 3 in 5 years' time. It's an immense bonding of power. It's almost like it's an oligopoly. Yeah, it's not a monopoly, but because they serve different markets, they could be also perceived as a monopoly for some markets. And there's no real steering on this because it's global. If it would only be US or Europe, it would be easy to tackle it. But because it's global, it's more difficult to handle this. So it's a sign of consolidation of entire markets into monopolies. And yeah, that's the question is how effective this is. They're making billions of profits now by just doubling and quadrupling, quintupling their prices. A container used to be from Europe to China to Europe used to be like 1,500 euros in expensive times. Now it's 8,000. So that's all all this is going not to the carrier, but not to the small SMEs, but it's going to the carrier, to these alliances. I hope this clarifies.
Yeah, this helps. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
as long as a question from Brian, is that 20 feet equivalent?
Yes. So TEU is 20-foot equivalent unit. Yeah, that's a standard unit to express container numbers. And sometimes you have 40-foot containers or 45-foot, but they all bring this back to 20-foot equivalent units.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the physical internet and how it manifests itself already today in physical internet 1.0. And then the next question is, okay, so where will this go? And this is where I want to introduce to you this arena that I talked about, this European story. ALICE stands for Alliance for Logistics Innovation Through Collaboration in Europe. Now, the background of this is that the European Commission spends a lot of money on research and innovation, and they have chosen to create, to mandate platforms, which are groups of companies and so industry, government, and research institutes on specific topics. They had like 20 ETPs in the beginning, and one of them was logistics. So among completely different topics, so it would be like physics, it would be biology or whatever, then they would have also one for logistics. And the idea of these groups is they develop the strategy for research and innovation. So the European Commission doesn't want to do this themselves. They don't want to commission this to consultants. They want in an open setting, pre-competitive setting, they want the industry to tell them what to invest in and what the needs are. So the assignment for this ALICE group was to create a strategy for research and innovation, and also the market deployment of innovation in our area. Yeah, and also to manage the knowledge, share the knowledge, and it's a network for collaborative innovation. So and this little chart shows kind of the subtopics. If you wish, here you see the physical internet as a road, as one of the steps towards a zero emission future, which was chosen as the main objective in 2050. And you see the terms here on the outer circle, like systems and technologies for interconnected logistics. This is very much information systems oriented, sustainability, corridors, hubs and synchromodality, and global coordination and collaboration. So here you see the physical internet term of collaboration coming back, and urban freight, urban logistics. So I've been a member of different groups here, especially corridors, hubs and synchromodality, sustainable logistics, supply chains. I'm in this group now, and I participated in making the vision for zero emission and for physical internet. And they have kind of stages, you know, the 2020, 2030, 2040, what would be our goals? Yeah, and they expressed these goals. I will not read them out completely because I will treat the more detailed roadmap in a minute. But this is the picture to talk about within Alice, and that everybody kind of supports. So whether you're from industry or from government, we talk about this vision. We talk about how to achieve this, and we try to form also research needs and stories that we then give to the European Commission, and then the European Commission will issue an open call for tenders for research and innovation, and then others, including myself, we can also bid on this and then execute part of this research program. So for me, there's a lot at stake as well. I can define sort of the direction and help to create it, help to realize it eventually. So this is Alice, this is the platform, and we meet a couple of times a year and we discuss these things, we create products and so on. This is just a snapshot of our members. I don't think it's the latest one, but you can see shippers like Procter & Gamble and L'Oreal here on top. These are typically European ones. I think Lóránt is a retailer and so on. You see service providers here, and there are many also that are not mentioned here, but okay, there are ports included, big ports like Rotterdam, the biggest in Europe, you know, manufacturers like Volvo, Scania, and so on. And then it goes on and on and on this. So we have various directions of intelligence here. Also clearly government, also industry associations, research centers, and they all talk about the same thing. So one of the main products here, and this was kind of closed down at the physical internet conference in which was supposed to be in China in 2020 in Shenzhen, but it was online. We have these conferences, so we're going to the 9th now, International Physical Internet Conference, where we meet about these things and we discuss the different strands of work, research, and so on. Typically, I don't know, 300-400 people, researchers coming together. So it's a niche conference, but it's very targeted towards this vision. And the roadmap is basically the product of Alice. And this is what I would like to introduce to you how this looks. What is this roadmap? What is inside? So, I mean, there's the website, by the way, and at the bottom, etp-logistics.eu. So you can look up all this material, download the documents if you're interested, and so on. It has 5 chapters. Yeah, so these are the pictures. Logistic networks. You can imagine what a network is. So it's multimodal and connected and so on. The nodes that are actually fulfilling a very important function of shifting all this freight and cross-docking it and bundling it and breaking the bulk. So one could even say that these are more important than the networks themselves. The networks just move it from A to B. It's not really exciting. Nothing happens with the freight there. Everything with the freight happens at the nodes. Now, once these networks are created at different levels and in different hierarchies, we get a system of logistics networks. Yeah, so that's a separate layer where these have to come together. We all have our networks. We have small networks regionally in states or at the continent. But what if we add all these up? Yeah, like the warehouses, like the 500,000 warehouses in the US, we get a system of networks. And then there are 2 topics which are more related to kind of the process of running this, where we want to make the network accessible to everyone, and that companies start to adopt, use the network. And as I introduced earlier, we have to look at governance. Yeah. So next is quite a detailed exposition of these topics. So please stay with me. I'll take you by the hand, step by step. And this is the kind of the talking picture, the core picture of this whole report, where we build it up according to the decades. Yeah, so we started this in 2017, I think 2018, and it goes on until 2040, which would then be kind of the physical internet realized. Yeah? You see these dimensions here. I can see a question in the chat. Let's see. Yes, Steve, thank you. Okay, we'll share the slides. Yeah. So if you look at these different chapters, which are the horizontal, the rows, you can see that where we are now, and this is kind of a critique of the current situation. Yeah. So in terms of nodes, we have non-standardized transshipment hubs. Everybody uses its own standards. We have, not even within a country, yeah, we have 5 different standards going on for intermodal, even in Europe, where we try to standardize. There is a rise of booking platforms, but it's not yet complete. It's just beginning. Yeah, we see a lot of messy treatment of these platforms. The terms of trade, the terms of transportation, supply chain management, information, they are scattered and they are unbalanced. Yeah, so one cannot say we have agreed on digital standards globally, whether it's for trade or for shipment information or position information. So the simplest things, emission measurement, it's still quite messy. They're there, but it's messy. Now we have the pooling and alliances, as I discussed with maritime alliances. This is already going on. But in terms of the system level functionality, this could best be characterized as silos within the silos. So the separated intranets, or not even yet intranets. And this has to go in a couple of decades towards these states. So we don't want these non-standardized transshipment nodes. We want autonomous node services. We want this to be fully automated, completely running according to the same standards. Also, the booking platforms, we want them to be connected inside a network so that the services and the operations can run smoothly. We want this governance to be changed so that the processes and the bodies are open for the global Pi network. And we want to go from pooling and alliances, which are kind of exclusive and excluding, so reserved, to an open system where everybody can access the Pi. Yeah, so the access and adoption has to be clarified. And from silos within silos to the true internet. Now, the next few slides will fill this in for the different decades. So this is the first one, where we go from non-standardized hubs to hubs which offer like an input-output service, which is Pi-like. So I don't have to worry about what's happening exactly at the terminal. I know how it will come out and within which time I have a service guarantee and so on. So at the Pi network level, we have what we call synchromodality. This is a European term. And we explain this as an abbreviation of synchronized intermodality. So you all know what intermodal transport is. This is when you ship a container from, say, road to rail. Yeah, you put a container or an entire truck on rail, for example. Yeah. Now, this is not very well synchronized usually. The waiting times of hours, days, trains get lost, trucks get lost, you name it. This has to be completely dynamically informed so that all these connections run seamlessly. And this is what we call synchronized intermodality or synchromodality. The regulations at the level of governance, they have to change, and also things like the Rotterdam rules, which govern how freight can be moved from one mode to another, or the Incoterms, they have to change in order to allow free and easy and quick exchange of shipments. We want vertical integration of different alliances, and we want these physical intranets to develop. And, we are here 2022, 2023, so we can already check how far we are on the way here. Next decade, up to 2030, I will not go into detail here, but this again adds functionality on top of what we have here. So the consequence is if we haven't reached what we aimed for in 25, we will not reach this either. Yeah, so this is of course not all linear, but this is the sequence in which things have to develop. So this integration, vertical integration, horizontal integration, it all has to happen. So we have discussed this extensively. I remember a session in Brussels where we were all around the table with many different parties, and everybody was calling out one of these things. And then suddenly we saw how we could put this in a matrix that it would evolve through time. And it was broadly received very well by everyone that, okay, so at least we're looking at the same thing. Now, whether vertical comes first or horizontal comes first, that's a different question, a difficult question. So let's not try to solve it here, we said. But simple things like this full asset sharing and competition rules, horizontally integrated networks, this will not happen before 2030. So let's put it here, you know, and synchromodality is already going on. So yeah, we might as well put it in 2020. So all these individual callouts have their individual story and their ambition. This is described in the report in more detail, and it orders the innovations for us. Now you can already see that we can derive research implications from this. Yeah? So if you want to get to nodes that interconnect across networks, fully standardized automated service requests in 2030, I better start my PhD research into the preliminaries now. Yeah? So this is the road mapping story I want to tell you. So this is about part C. Then next is how do we arrive at research? I just want to again pause for 1 minute to see. Yes, thank you. So to see whether there are any questions.
Yeah, can I ask a quick question? So
Yes,
for
please.
the roadmap and what is being implemented, what might be the most difficult part when the roadmap evolving? Is it the governance?
Yes.
Or the collaboration between the companies?
There is quite a general agreement that governance is the toughest. Yeah, we've also recently a PhD defended his thesis on a PhD candidate on this topic, and he talked to many experts and did some modeling also, and he found that this governance is so tough. You know, I will give an example to illustrate it. The Incoterms are they explain the transfer of responsibilities for the product between the sender and the receiver. So, and there are like 20 Incoterms. I don't even know exactly how many, but if you go to a factory to pick up your stuff, let's say you bought some tires for a car, you pick it up at the factory, that's called X Works, and you will be responsible for the transportation to your home. If you let them bring the tires to you, then the company is responsible. If you pick it up halfway at the port because of some transportation arrangement, then the transfer changes there, or the responsibility transfers there. Now, all these terms are very important for trade to go on efficiently, and they're being discussed globally by all different parties, and they're agreed upon so that everybody says, okay, if I say cost insurance freight or I say X Works, then this is exactly what I mean, and these are the legal arrangements around it. And that's eases trade tremendously. The problem with this is that this is always done in hindsight. So it's like we see what works, and then we agree that, yeah, this is proven stuff. Let's work from now on, let's work this way. But it's like driving by looking in the rearview mirror. You know, if you only look back at what works and then decide how you will work, then you will never find something which helps you to work forward. So the Incoterms are this rearview mirror stuff, and we already run into problems because we don't have Incoterms for those situations where we want to swiftly, quickly, and in an unknown, so previously unknown case, we want to maybe shift freight from one mode to the other or from one owner to the other. And this is just not possible. We don't have any Incoterms for that. So we have no way to agree legally, nicely, how to do this. And that's a problem. This is a typical governance problem around Incoterms, and this whole story is fraught with these kind of things. Yeah. So before this all materializes, we'll have to scan and like dissect the system in terms of governance. I'm sorry for the elaborate answer, but I hope it's clear.
What might be the definition for Incoterms that you mentioned?
The definition?
Yeah.
There are agreements about the transfer of responsibility for the product during shipping. So it's Incoterms. You can look it up in the internet, in INCO terms. Incoterms.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Professor Tavasszy.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, okay. And this was an example about city logistics where Incoterms just frustrates the use of urban consolidation centers. So, but anyway, this also applies to C and so on. So let me continue with the consequences for research, because so far I've been talking about how we would see the world develop. So from a distance, yeah, we look at the world, see how it evolves, and we see all these physical internet things happening. But we as researchers in academia, we have to perform in terms of new science. So how do we relate to this, and how do we derive work from this, which will have an impact then eventually, hopefully. Yeah, there's the Incoterms. Yeah, excellent. So, and let me start with this one. And if I would be in the classroom, I would ask people to raise their hand if they've seen this before. It's the technology readiness level. I cannot do this now, so I'll explain it briefly. It's was built by NASA and a long time ago to explain how knowledge and principles, how they converge into practice. So and the technology readiness level of 1 is that we're only talking about a basic principle, kind of a fundamental scientific principle. And TRL 9 means that it's ready for application. That is, as they called it at that time, flight proven. In between, there are levels. TRL 2 application, TRL 3 proof of concept, TRL 4 function. So you can see slowly knowledge evolving into designs, into practice that is known within its context, how it should perform. Then it's tested again, so that somebody can buy the technology and can apply it, or that is ready for practice. So one could say that the focus of scientific research is in TRL 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe. So we rarely see scientific research going into like full-scale demonstrations in the environment. I mean, we venture there now and then, but the focus is on proof of concept, applications, basic principles, verification, and so on. And the rest of the world, so the non-researchers, they're mostly busy with applying this stuff. So they are interested in, can I get it to use, and can I get it to improve my company, or can I get it to serve my customer better? Yeah, so this is for the positioning of the researcher in these roadmaps. This is a very important concept of technology readiness. So this is where I start from, and we have to know our role of researchers in this innovation ladder. So these things like hubs and networks and nodes, the way we express them in the roadmap are kind of high TRL expressions. Yeah. So if a term of trade like Incoterm has to function, it is something which has to be flight proven. Yeah? It cannot be just an application of a principle. It has to be flight proven and has to operate in practice. So with that in mind, we can look at the kind of the TRL 1 to 4 topics and problems behind these steps. And I'm just going to take this in 2 groups. Okay, so we talked about governance and access. We talked about more of the technical stuff and organizational stuff. So I'll make the split there. And the first group will be in nodes, logistics networks, and a system of logistics networks as these nodes knit these networks together. And so some examples of research questions, okay, because there are many, but I just want you to get a feel for what kind of things we're working on, and you'll recognize this also in the papers and the publications that are out there. So what kind of information systems are needed to support the physical internet at real world scale? So it's not a proof of concept of a little thing, but what if we want to serve the entire world with some kind of information system? I need an architecture that can grow. Yeah, this is, by the way, it's question 3 also. Which system architecture can scale with the pie without collapsing? So we need approaches like from cyber physical systems, which is very heavily ICT oriented. It's computer science, like the RAMI architecture, the reference architecture model for ICT in Industry 4.0. Very advanced approaches that allow us to click immediately from functionalities, so from business functionality, like I want to reach this destination in 6 hours, to some kind of software platform maybe, or some kind of hardware like Internet of Things stuff, so these are deeper research questions that require design and optimization. It's also about hardware, containers and terminals to realize this massive standardization in container sizes and modularity, as we call it. A question more on the softer side is, if we do all this with these networks and nodes across the world, massive collaboration, how will the user requirements evolve? You know, my very, very first slide, remember, with the washing machine and the bunny and the 3D printer, it's all about user requirements. We want things to be customized and we want them fast. Yeah, so what if we support all this movement with these kind of very efficient networks, you know, as not like Amazon is doing today by cross-subsidization, but by realizing the physical internet? Will we become more spoiled and demand even more? So how does this look like? And we have already researched in this direction, but it's a lot to go. Here, another big topic is transaction cost economics. I will not collaborate with everyone if it costs me a lot of money. It's just too expensive. You know? But if it's cheap, like I use my mobile phone today, my smartphone, and I mean, the costs are really almost zero, yeah, of communicating with everyone. So I use it a lot. Yeah, the cheaper it became, calling each other and connecting through platforms and apps, the more we did it. Yeah. So how will digitalization and increased data sharing, how will it accelerate this kind of Pi network? And then we can link up to these very specific points and start to optimize or start to model. And this is then the real research that is underneath. The contextual
Tavasszy,
yes.
Just a reminder, we have 20 more minutes left.
Okay, I will then converge. Okay.
If we,
I'll try to finish in 5 minutes then, and I will be a bit quicker. Contextual factors are more about the governance side, and also here we can ask there several research questions. I will not treat them one by one, discuss them one by one, but you can have a look at the slides later on, but they tackle these kind of governance challenges. So, and to close, actually, it's some examples of quantitative and qualitative research, and I will not spend a lot of time on these slides, just give you quick impressions. And I have 4 or 5 slides about quantitative and 2 about qualitative research, just to give you an idea of what kind of work can be expected here. So the first group is all about transaction costs, about how groups of companies can work together and how their cooperation increases with reducing transaction costs. There are models for this, we can calculate this. It's also about sharing. So if companies, you see these colors, red, yellow, green, blue, these are warehouses of companies that serve a city. If they only use their own warehouses, remember the example of 500,000 warehouses in the US, you'll get a certain configuration with high costs. If all these warehouses become open, you see the 4 colors being mixed here at the edges, then the systems become cheaper. And you can save a lot of money with this. This is actually optimization and modeling work. This is a slide about our PhD students who worked on the supply side, on the optimization side of intermodal systems. There are different levels: network design, pricing strategies, gain sharing, service design, and all this has been done in the past 10 years by many different PhDs. This is only a handful. And there's one lonely guy on the right who worked on the demand side. He asked the question, so what does it do to the demand of services, and how will companies engage who use these services? This is the next slide, which I will not treat in detail now. I'll just skip over it. And then there's, of course, the question of not just transportation decisions, but other supply chain decisions, how these are affected. I realize I made many more slides than I can handle. So if we go to governance, this is, I think, a separate message, which will be, well, strange maybe to many of you, maybe not. It's about the influence of social sciences here. So if we want to really accelerate innovation, we shouldn't just make calculations. We also have to understand how all these actors come together and how they form new networks. How they decide to make investments together, what processes they're in, how they accept and use technology, what kind of values or beliefs or norms govern their behavior, and how we create like legal agreement, administrative agreement about the new systems. And this is heavily inspired by social sciences. This is different research than we do usually with modeling. So this is about engineering systems, the systems of systems dimension, case study research, action research, design science research. So it's a dimension that we rarely use, I think, as engineers, but that we should be aware of, that it's also needed. That's the social science side of things, and this will help us to let the system grow. This is a picture from innovation management and in fact transition management, which distinguishes 3 levels of a system: the kind of the big landscape, as I talked about, the physical internet, which is really a landscape story, and I also talked about individual technologies like the hyperloop, information systems, and in between they sort themselves out into a regime which will then function as part of the new landscape. And how do these things relate to each other? How much time do they take? This kind of theories and this kind of approaches become important when we want to make a big change in the landscape, like sustainability, reducing CO2 emissions in 20 or 30 years' time. Many things have to change, and we have to be able to discuss the system like this qualitatively. So that's just to close another dimension. So my main propositions here for discussion are that we have seen many disruptions in the last years, but my position is that it will not affect the long-term evolution of the logistics system, because all these innovations and all these changes will converge into this pie. So we shouldn't get distracted, but focus on the long-term vision and accept one of these visions as our main vision, irrespective of all kinds of disruptions. I also think, and this is about the roadmaps and our position in the roadmaps, that we share responsibility with private and public actors to actually get these things done, to make innovation happen. So we should get organized to be able to do this. And third, I think we should also look at this with like an activist lens and contribute and engage with this bigger community. So not just organize a research, but also work with those people, work with policymakers and work with industry people to become part of this whole innovation scheme ourselves. So I'll stop here. Then we have 15 minutes for discussion. Thank you for the warning signal in time. Let me stop sharing my screen, and then we can continue.
Thank you, Professor Lóránt.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Since I have asked a lot, I will give the chance for the audience for questions. Thank you again, Professor Lóránt, for your excellent, informative presentation.
Yeah, it's a typical story from Europe, where I mean, it's shaped many of the things we do, and I would be very curious to hear also what kind of practices you have in the US, but the vision comes from the US. Yeah, it's Benoit's vision. In fact, from Canada when he was there at Cyril. Yeah. Okay, so guys, anyone, if you have ideas, engage, please, and let's use these 10 minutes, 15 minutes to talk a little bit. I know it's early for you in the morning, but let's try.
I just had a point that's bothering me. I've been working a lot on governance, so it's really interesting to hear your view on that. And I can see that there are things getting better in terms of local, regional governance, cities, regions working together with regions with regions, cities with cities, and working with industry, the freight industry. Mm-hmm. But at a more global level, it seems that, and I'm absolutely not an expert, of course, but it seems that geopolitics and other major crises just show that countries are going apart and main continents are going apart. So how are we going to achieve any coordination because of that split that is increasing between major countries?
Yes. Yeah, so I think we see positive things, and we also see a dilution. More and more, we're able to measure everything across the globe. This is a technical thing. It doesn't really depend on governance, but it has a strong impact on governance. So if we can agree on globally on how to measure CO2 emissions, like what the GLEC is doing, I think that gives us a step, makes us take a step ahead. So this might be like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, like the procession they have in this little town of Echternach in Luxembourg. They take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But so, of course, I mean, the agreement on maritime emissions, the agreement on air, there are systems that will work globally, but I agree with you that real global governance is lacking. Yeah. And that's a problem. Yeah.
And even getting worse.
Well, in some ways, yes.
I'm pessimistic.
Yeah, and it's important not to lose heart, but I think the way that emissions are evolving now, it's really not going in the right direction, right? So the sustainability. Yeah, I agree.
But thanks a lot, Laurie. And I'm in the US actually right now, so I'm part of the California audience.
Yeah. Other question?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Professor Tavasszy, for a great talk that touched on almost every little detail of a very complicated, context of issues that the world needs to tackle in the next 20, 30 years, right? So that was fantastic. But and one thing that I had a question on, I think you talked about this in different ways. Geopolitics, international geopolitics. I mean, what do we do about it? I mean, what can we do about it? The international, the trade agreements between, between governments, and then you have rogue governments, and you have, for instance, U.S. That does have some stable policies, but at the same time, certain key items can suddenly get changed every 4 years, depending on who the new president is.
Yeah.
What do we do about it, and how do we bring that? How do we take account of the effect of that in all our planning?
Yes, thank you for this $1 million question. So I think, there are many perspectives. So I think as transportation people, we have to be humble. Yeah. So we depend completely on very strange different powers in terms of how the energy transition will be going. There are 3 billion people waiting to buy Coca-Cola and to drive a car, So I think there are powers beyond our control, like we see now with the wars, and I just heard that read that the former the Abe, former president of Japan, has been killed.
Yes,
so there are things that are really beyond our control, and which I think are huge powers. So, but it means that we have to also try to understand as intellectuals what this anatomy of power is and how it affects our systems. So, of course, we cannot be held responsible for the Ukraine war, but we can be held responsible for what decisions we make to deal with energy systems and transport, given what this new situation confronts us with. So I think that's why we have to try to understand how these powers are shaping up. But it is, I think, we have to be humble. So it's not something we can influence. Yeah.
And maybe a related question, going back to the consolidation slide that you showed with the 2M and Ocean groups. How do we? I mean, it's not monopoly yet, but it could get there. How do we control something like this? I mean, internationally, we don't have a way to split things up if we need to. Within countries, you probably can. I suppose if US or China or India or somebody just starts breaking it or all on their own with the help of whatever geopolitical alliance, maybe that's possible. But I mean, what do we do about that consolidation? Is that a good? I mean, I think you made the point that it is a good thing to a certain extent, but beyond that, maybe it isn't, because it is affecting prices.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So I think the disbenefits of so the benefits of consolidation were, of course, economies of scale and ease of investments and so on, so that we could have lower prices for container shipping. But I haven't seen lower prices for 2 years. So that also has disbenefits. So maybe we should have kept it that way, that we have 15 companies instead of 3, and then a bit higher prices. I mean, who cares? As consumer, I wouldn't feel it. Yeah, but I mean, there's another question from Montana in relation to this, that you know, the Chinese are buying ships very quickly, and they have top-down control with their companies, with the ports that they own. So if something happens diplomatically, they have other means to retaliate, you know. But I mean, we are behaving in the same way towards Iran, you know. So these kind of structures of power are not really new, and I think definitely there's a new player. Yeah, China is the new player here, and they have also big power. So of course it changes the landscape, but yeah, it doesn't necessarily yeah, it doesn't give us new handle on things because it's global. So I cannot see a global, like a sphere of governance developing where China would release control, you know, and would give us more power. I don't think it's happening, or Europe. Yeah. So it's the same way as things have been going for the US in the past 60 years. Yeah. So I think that's or 80 years. So, but again, as transportation people, I think we'll have to suffer through this. Yes. Even with decarbonization, I mean, we are talking about using hydrogen or using battery electric vehicles or this electric road system, and we don't realize that it's not us who will determine the prices of energy carriers. You know, there will be industry using hydrogen, and that will set the price. If it's too expensive for us, we'll have to choose something else. It's not entirely up to us.
That's right.
So maybe I think it's upon us to make sure that we have people who are aware of all this, and we have students doing PhDs in these kind of topics. So there are enough people in all countries, including the Indias and Chinas and all the places who are aware of these issues and the deep global impacts of this whole topic. Yeah, I mean, we saw you know, just baby formula. I mean, whoever thought that US would be in trouble for feeding the babies in this country?
Yeah. So there's a wealth of subjects out there which are multidimensional, transdisciplinary, and that if we are, I mean, we all develop in a certain silo, in a niche, you know, whether we are in operations research but there are people who do political science, management science, and who also study transportation systems. Mm-hmm. Those are different journals. We don't even see those people. We don't know who they are. But it would be very interesting to work with them to give our research more societal relevance. I think that's because the world needs it. We cannot afford to just continue in our own little path and build our models as we do.
Oh, I totally agree. I think we are a lot to blame from the transportation research side. You know, I've been in transportation for 30 years, but I have, you know, I'm looking up what Incoterms is, you know, so, you know, I think we all have to be blamed for not being out there. And then thank you for, you know, for your efforts in bringing more attention to the topic and that. And also just very quickly, just to mention, you know, Professor Dablanc, who joined. Nice to see you here. And Vicky was just texting me that you are in California now. So welcome to California.
Good I'm back after 3 years. It's nice to be here.
Yes, that's nice. And no, just you know, leaving my comments out there, and thank you, Professor Tavasszy, for a great talk. Siwei, more questions?
Yeah, and we have 3 more minutes. Any last minute questions from the audience? Actually, I'm wondering what's Professor Tavassy's view on the supply chain crisis? Because previously we have a talk from Professor Charles Edwards from North Carolina, and in his view, he thought the supply chain issue comes from the demand side, which is the company like Amazon. If you click that item or the product and they start ordering, even before you buy it. So he thinks this creates a huge surge on the demand from the demand side, which creates the supply chain issues in the United States. I'm wondering what's your point towards that? What might be? Yeah.
Yes, so it's a bit difficult to comment because I haven't heard a story, but I think that there are many supply chain issues, right? So if it's the shortage of toilet paper, or we're talking about ports which have a lack of containers, those are different issues. And but certainly, I think the speed with which companies react or anticipate on consumer demand is frightening. I mean, how quickly and how well they can do this. And I think that can create very interesting dynamics. Yeah. So we've all done the beer game at one point in our career when we looked at system dynamics of ordering and how these waves go up and down, you know, and the bullwhip effect in supply chain. So, and we are far away from understanding these new dynamics, yeah, of how companies order and how these instant fulfillment structures, yeah, what kind of impact they create. Yeah, so I think it resonates with me, but it's difficult to comment, say yes or no or something, because I haven't heard the full story. But I kind of see the point. Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Professor.
So I want to thank you also for being such a great audience and for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit to you. It's nice to, well, this is, I think, one of the big wins of the past 2 years, yeah, that this is so easy to do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
See, there is one final question, I think, from Montana.
Yeah.
In the chat.
Montana, do you want to unmute yourself?
No, I believe he answered it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I think we are out of time. Please join me in a thank you pause for Professor Tavasszy. Thank you so much for giving us a talk, even in the Friday late afternoon and early evening. Thank you so much. Have a great
Yeah,
weekend.
you're welcome, and have a great day and a good weekend.
Thank you so much.